So I am excited and delighted to introduce you all to Laurie Wallace, who is both a cherished friend and also a wild soul woman facilitator. So very familiar with all of the wild soul women archetypes. But today she's going to talk to us about her relationship to the desert woman archetype. So Laurie, please take it away. Tell us a little about that relationship.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much also for just this wisdom and the support and the books and the training and the poetry. I do just need to say to anyone watching this that I am a completely now, I feel, different kind of whole grounded woman who, prior to reading your book, Mary, I think I always had an echo shadow of all of this. And but in this world that we're in right now, there's this sense of being constantly untethered and cast out, almost like you're drifting in outer space. And I remember going through, your whole cycle through all the archetypes and learning about them. When I first came into desert, I was so detached that all I could do at that time was even imagine myself with just sandals on, standing in one place. And it was almost, I think I was reflecting maybe even on a film, something. But it didn't take long through your gateway of poetry and the archetype, because what I came to realize and learn a lot about with the archetypes is that they are our bones. They are our bone marrow. And please forgive me if I cry. Actually, don't say forgive me, but just know, everyone, it's so significant for me. And so as I went through that process and was reading, additional, because Mary, you're opening up for me, Women Who Run with Wolves, or, I think I have that title wrong, Run with Wolves.
Yeah, no.
Is that right?
That's good.
But, and the woman who finds the bones and, reanimates the coyote and the wolf and, and sings the song. It's a woman who is dusty, who is old, and, maybe has the wisdom of the, of all the strata of rock, and all of that. I had, I think, been denied quite a few of these archetypes in my youth growing up. And certainly desert woman was carved out, because here I am in a flower. And, I am very heart-based, and I am a terminal optimist. And that's beautiful. But without desert, without understanding, and later at some point, I may be in a conversation about mountain, but, without desert, really understanding, hey, here's the pain, here's the truth. Here's also the fear and what that means, how it burns your feet, like how you can walk on the hot sand, and how you can ask and be aware of what your resources, what they need to be, and how they might be scarce, but how that actually turns you around to very much with gratitude, cherish what you have in front of you and in this landscape within you that knows how to live and resource what it needs. I didn't have heat. I didn't have that growing up. As a woman in today, was always told, you're happy, and aren't you always happy? And, you never have feelings that are anything that make me feel any heat, or that I don't have to face anything that I'm concerned about or worried about in the world. I was, again, untethered.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know. And I think it's so interesting that you talk, because I think that desert woman aspect of us really is exiled. I mean, it's like we have to go into exile in a way to find her, to leave how we've been enculturated and community, how we're told we're supposed to be, is that lush, ever blooming, as I look at that gorgeous flower behind you, woman, to find who we are in, as you said, that bone marrow place. And I think it's so important, because one of the other things that really came up for me when you were speaking was this idea of as women, that we can be self-resourced.
Mm. Mm.
That, you know, because the other thing is we've also been quite become sort of needy of approval and recognition and admiration, and, you know, and we can sort of become so dependent on the goodwill and admiration of others that we lose our sense of self. But when we're self-resourced, when, we can give, even if we are not abundant with money or resources or internal resources, even at this point, we can begin that process
Oh my
of
gosh,
saying, I have
absolutely.
enough, I have enough, I am enough, I am enough. Yeah.
Mm. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yes. And you know
Yeah.
what? When we contemplate that and live it through COVID, the fever, desert woman says you can be in the heat. And and so that idea of burning off that even the form of me is only seen through your reflection back, or the reflection even of water, which is very scarce. The idea that I am here in my bones, in this rock, and that not only can I live through the heat, but I actually draw it in now. And I say, burn me, please burn away all the ways that I have been tamed and that I have been denied my own fire and capacity to actually survive through COVID or anything else, or even just being a woman at this time of what we call the Great Turning, coming into this time where the woman and the feminine is back in power with, instead of being subordinate, kind of underneath and constantly shaped that way. I'm finding that this year, and I know this interview is in 2022 and someone might be watching this in another year, but 2022 goes right back to what you just said, Mary. I've been noticing that there's this, I can behold just in myself and actually recognize myself as my great resource and actually as my spiritual teacher, and feel that as things are happening around me, one of the poems you've shared, I think, is Rebecca Solnit may have come up, or maybe just through, all this archetype work, I found something she said, that maybe living is learning to stay or keep your balance amid surprises.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do feel that being a desert woman gives me that. If I think about any of the landscapes, and they're all so integral. Really, ocean was the one that I spotted as a young girl. I won't go into that now, but that's the one that came to me right away.
Yeah.
But desert and starting here is the one that allows me to keep my balance amid surprises. And why wouldn't? Look at all the creatures, in the desert and how they survive. God, I'm so incredibly in awe of the desert archetype.
Right, right. They are adaptive, if nothing else. I mean, and resourceful beyond belief. Yeah. So I know that you work really in helping, how do you call it? Placement. I'm so bad at human resources, placing people.
Yeah, I mean, I became a recruiter in 2003 and started my own agency in 2005 to transform it from headhunting into human connection. So that was the beginning of leaning into the burn of the fire and resourcing myself. I started my own company, and for 6 months, nothing happened. There was no water, there was no shade. Yeah. And I was running on, my husband would come into the office and he'd say, "How you doing today?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm running on fumes, of fumes." And ultimately, I was running on the fumes of an atom, of an electron. And then one day I said, "I have nothing." And when I said that, the next day, the business then flowered,
Isn't that amazing? But how do you, I know you use these archetypes in working with people who come to you often in quite tender positions of transition from one job into another, not knowing exactly what the future holds. Perhaps they're excited, but perhaps they're also really afraid. So how do you subtly sort of help them with that place, perhaps, where nothing may be happening for a while until that right thing comes along? How do you help them with bringing up this imagery of Desert Woman?
Mm. I just must have about 3 to 4 times in the last 48 hours. With this new moon that we have right now, there are so many people that I work with that are experiencing endings, and not only with jobs that are ending, but also relationships that seem to be ending at the same time. And so I find myself really talking about fire and heat, and the idea of leaning into this moment. We really align as women, especially with snake, within this archetype. And I remember you, Mary, saying at one point how snakes, that they will self-wound, they'll go up and rub themselves on that rock and they'll create that wound so they can shed that skin and they can grow. And without that, they would stifle or choke themselves off. Right. And so I find myself quite a bit mentioning that story, even that this is a wound. And sometimes it is a self-inflicted. Sometimes it is like they quit their job, or somebody even said yesterday with this relationship, I said, are you on the same path? And she said, well, I keep trying to, discuss and help my partner, kind of move, get off the couch and do things. And I said, so you're in a different path. And I said, so you're pushing him to do that. And this is a wounding, or it's a moment now of seeing what's true. And, what's the mirage that, what is the mirage you've been living with, and what's true now? So there's so much conversation around truth and around shedding as it comes in, and bringing people in. And of course, most people have an initial sense of, ooh, heat, no, thank you, no snake, no, I need, I want to be in the lush, garden.
Right.
And so, but when it's brought in this way, and especially at a moment when they're experiencing it, I think the archetype comes alive, even without my using that word necessarily for that moment,
exactly,
for that beginner. But it does come alive for them. And if they're experiencing what I'm experiencing, what I have through the training I went through with you, 5 years ago, 6?
I think less than that, but life has been so strange. I mean, who knows? Who knows?
It's been a while, but I know that there was a great sense of community and comfort when you suddenly, because this working with the archetypes and Desert Woman, when you realize, again, you're getting grounded and you're within a community, you're within an archetype that is, it's so solid, it is so permanent. So even talking about the snake is it's so useful, but it isn't as permanent and is in that bone marrow as the landscape itself. And so what I love about your book and this new book that's coming out that I'm so excited about is that, through your stories and through the poetry, it does allow somebody to come in to understand something that complex. Whereas, like Carl Jung will talk about it, but it's extremely complicated and beyond, many people. But when we recognize it as a woman, as a bones, and as the foundation, I find it so reassuring. And as a healer, I show up that way for people at transitions in their career. It is all through nature's wisdom, and grounding them into earth this way is essential.
Yeah. And I think, something else that you speak to and what you're sharing is that in a way, working with these archetypes allow us to come at things slant. And by that I mean is that when we bring forth the metaphor of the snake, the self-wounding snake who has to tear away at the skin, otherwise literally he will be strangled to death. But it's ultimately in favor of growth. The snake needs to do that because she is growing, and if she doesn't shed, then she cannot grow and she will die. And metaphorically, of course, this is true for us. So if we don't actually meet situations that create that wound, and the wound being that moment of separation from our old existence, and an opening, a gaping wound, an opening into what is new, then we'll, as you so rightly said, we'll arrange it, because the soul is on a journey.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so the soul only wants you to find this true, authentic, bedazzling being that you are. And so it will literally force a reckoning of some sort. But I think when we can talk about it in terms of these metaphors, these allegories, these archetypes, it it takes away. If I said to somebody, oh, you're just doing this to hurt yourself because you blah, blah, blah. Well, that's kind of confrontational, and it's not an invitation into a realm of imagination and creative symbols that allow us to find the truth in a different way, through a different language, through a different voice, not the transactional language of the day, but the night language, the language of dream and metaphor and all of these things. And I hugely believe in that, because for me as a facilitator of poetry therapy, that's what poetry is about, is how the image shifts the consciousness. And so I think that's really what you have said so eloquently. I just want to end on desert, because I know we're going to be talking to you about all these different archetypes, which I'm so excited about. But just if you were to say, you imagine now you've got this circle of wild soul women around you, and they're starting this journey. And as the start of their journey, they are encountering their desert woman. What is the sort of gift of wisdom that you would like to give them in regard to that?
I just got the chills. First of all, I would just want to say to all these women that are coming into this program and reading this book, I just want to, and I'm getting chills just all over. You are a healer. You're here. I feel like going through this work is that when we go through and it becomes part of it, like we awaken these archetypes, they're always there. But when we say hello, and we open up and we work with that and we recognize that we really can come forward now as authentic whole healers, always through our own life lessons and challenges, continuing to understand this miracle of life. And so I would say to women in this, that picture us both right now as women in the desert, and we each have some sort of totem, or something that we have found. And whatever you might be picking up right now, is it a rock? Is it a fossil? Is it a bone? But collect these things. I think you're here because you're a healer. I mean, it's really a very profound work here, and it can be beyond. Sometimes you can feel this is beyond me, or it can be beyond people that we're talking to. That's why we bring it in, as Mary said, through the poetic form. And so this aspect of picking up your totems and sharing them and showing up and being here together in this dreamscape of what's real, and how we all are one, how we have this spirit alive. The rock has the spirit of life. We all have it. And from this place of remembrance, we come together as these desert women, powerful healers. You've just begun. There's so much ahead. Welcome to the circle.
Dear Laurie, thank you so much. I'm going to bid you goodbye for the moment, but our conversations will continue in different landscapes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mary.